Good morning, West Coast, and happy, afternoon to myself on the East Coast. And welcome to the Fantasy NFL Today Sunday with Fiddle and Sticks. My man, Fids, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good, my guy. How are you doing? We crushed last week, so let's keep the ball rolling into this week. I think last week we ended up plus 10 units in the betting space. Absolutely dominant. It was a 16-6 week. So we are hoping that snowball continues to pick up speed and we keep this thing going.
Yeah, and if this is the first time you guys have tuned into this show, make sure that you are just putting any questions that you have right onto the comment section, and we'll get to them at some point throughout the show. We also have a special guest that is going to be coming on with us when we talk fantasy sports. It's one of our sports NFL writers, and that's Ray Lynn, and he'll be with us right after we get through winning you guys some money. If you haven't followed Fids on Twitter, I highly suggest you guys do it if you're trying to make yourself some money. He is on fire, like he had just mentioned before. So I am very tuned in and interested to hear what he has going in the betting department this week. I was looking at the slates, and I'm nervous with some of these games. A lot of these spreads don't intrigue me too much, but that's why I am not the handicapper, and that's why we leave that to Fiddle. Fids, let us hear. What do we got on the slate this week?
All right, JP. So this week might be another week of the dog. I kind of agree with you. There are a bunch of spreads that I'm unsure how to play. So I actually have less total unit exposure than last week or week one. I'm reducing my plays just a bit. However, there are still some spots that I absolutely really like. And I want to start this conversation off with the schedule situation of the Atlanta Falcons. Now, the Falcons played the Rams last week in LA, had that late comeback where they had that backdoor cover. That was great for me. I was on the Falcons plus 9.5. And they ended up staying at the University of Washington in Seattle because they play against the Seahawks this week. So when a team stays out west and stays in the city and does not have to travel both places, they have less distractions because honestly, they're not with their family, their kids, their whatever, like all that stuff. They're just staying in a hotel, doing their job, getting in their film study, practice, going back to the hotel. When a team actually stays and does not travel and stays on the road, they perform much better in the second game. They come out really prepared. They come out ready to win. So I really like the Falcons this week. And then honestly, my best bet, JP, is to go to the week 4 slate already and to bet on the Browns week 4, because now they're going to play. The Browns are going to play against, they just played on Thursday night. So the Browns have 10 days of rest. They have the mini bye. And now they come and play the Atlanta Falcons when the Falcons return home after 2 weeks. And when the Falcons players return home after 2 weeks, a lot of these guys have young families, kids, wives, the whole thing. A lot of increased distractions, a lot of, hey, I'm back. I got to get the kids ready for school. I got to, be home for the dinner table. There's a lot of like reintegrating yourself into the family life, which just pulls you away from the football life a bit. So what we've seen historically about this trend with travel is team does really well in the second week. They stay on the road and then they come back and people are like, oh, wow, this team did so well on the road. They're going to replicate it at home. No, smack it the other way, because it's really correlated to the travel schedule, the distractions, the family life, and things outside of football. So we can bet into that in a football sense. So I absolutely love the Falcons this week and the Browns next week. And then my number one best bet on the board for this week, I've gone 2-0 in giving out my best bets so far each week, is DeAndre Swift prop bet over 72.5 total rushing and receiving combined yards. I really expect some fireworks in that game. I think Swift's volume share is going to be a lot higher than last week's because he was coming off that hurt ankle. We're hearing he's feeling great this week. So loving DeAndre Swift over on his prop, loving the Falcons +1, and then the Browns week 4 -3. I'm already going to tell you it's going to be a huge bet for me. A lot of exposure and probably my best bet of next week. I could tell you that already.
Yeah, and I agree with that Swift one, even for fantasy purposes, right? I mean, he should have a monster game this week against the Minnesota Vikings, who on defensively, they couldn't stop, a nosebleed last week against the Eagles. I think Swift runs wild this week. Obviously, the Sun God as well is a great play here. I think really anybody in that game, because I do expect some fireworks, is a great play. That's the Detroit Lions and the Minnesota Vikings game. A lot of those guys I haven't really checked on daily yet. That is also your space, but I'm sure they're probably pretty expensive, right? In terms of that game because of how much scoring is supposedly going on here.
So on Tuesday, I do my spend up show of my podcast where I discuss the highest priced players on the board. And this week at wide receiver, we had Amon-Ra, the sun god himself, come join the top tier of receivers. And he crossed the threshold where I need to start talking about him on Tuesday with the higher spends. Yeah. So yes, St. Brown certainly cost a lot. A guy like Hawkinson, great play. But I really like playing into this game in terms of DFS. If you are playing DFS today, I love a guy like Irv Smith. I love a guy like Justin Jefferson. I mean, we love him every week. You could play into a Kirk Cousins situation. You could even go budget quarterback with Jared Goff. And I think we'll talk about that. I have a question for you about Jared Goff in a few minutes. Certainly this game should produce some fireworks. JP, can I explain to you what implied probability means? And I talk to you about a crazy bet situation on this particular game I have today.
Let it rip.
Okay, so last Sunday, I often talk about betting ahead, just like I did with the Browns for week 4. I always bet ahead for the next week on Sunday morning, Sunday night. I'm very early to put in my bets. So last week, I put in a bet over 50.5 for the Lions versus Vikings game. And then throughout the week, that line has ticked up. Right. And now it's 52.5, where I actually took the under 52.5. Now, JP, let me explain to you a little lesson about some gambling math and implied probability. These are the things that get me going. I'm going to tell you.
Yeah, I'm not a math guy, so please let it rip. So I have no idea.
This is like the most exciting stuff to me. So in both of my bets, I have a 1.1 unit to win 1. Given that they have split numbers, one is over 50, the other is under 52.5 for both of them. Over 50.5, under 52.5. That means one of them is automatically winning, correct?
Yep.
So I'm automatically going to win 1 unit, and I probably will lose 1.1 unit on the other side. So my net is going to be negative 1/10 of a unit. However, we know if this game lands at 51 or 52, which are both key NFL total numbers, I will middle this and win both bets and return a full 2 units. So my risk is 1/10 of a unit. My potential winnings is a full 2 units. So that carries an implied probability of how often does that need to hit for this to be profitable. It's 5%, right? Because I'm getting a 20x on my payout if I middle this. So I have a 5% chance of implied probability to win. However, I know that since 51 and 52 are key NFL numbers, they both land there about 3.8% of the time. So if you combine those, I have a 7.6% chance of this being 51 or 52. Add in the caveat that because this game is priced at that point spread, it's more likely to land at that point spread. This is those 3.8 numbers includes, games that the over-under is 41 and 38 and 44 and whatever. When the game's actually priced here, you get an additional 3.5% of likelihood. So now I'm looking at about an 11, 12% likelihood that this bet hits in the middle zone. And I have a 5% implied probability. So while I don't think I'm actually going to win that bet and middle it because it's such a low odds, the value is extreme and it's a really fun bet heading into this week.
Right. It's really, you're not really risking much at all. And if you guys were listening to that, like I was, my eyes started to cross a little bit once you got to the whole mathematic part of it all. But what he was trying to say is he got in early enough on that over under at that 50. And as it slowly went up, he decided to bet that under at 52.5. So this way, if it hits in the middle, he wins out big. And if not, he's going to, almost break even in his bet. So I like that approach. So that's why you need to follow him on Twitter and get there early in the week so you can get in those early game lines. I have a question for you here on the things. I'm looking at that Cincinnati Bengals Jets game. Okay. And obviously it's probably a stay away type of thing, but my gut is just saying the Bengals have to turn it around at some point. And why not today against the New York Jets? I get it. They have offensive line issues, but we need to remember they have a revamped offensive line. It takes time. Offensive line is the hardest position in the NFL after corner because I'm biased because I played corner. But they need to communicate with each other and they need to be on the same page. They're not on the same page right now, but why not turn it around this week? I saw the line this morning at -6 Cincinnati. Is that something that you advise? Stay away? What do you think?
Okay. So you gave that whole spiel without even mentioning that the Jets win came on a crazy lucky 1 in 3,000, chance where they scored a touchdown, got an onside kick, and scored another touchdown and against an actually good defense who had the ball with 2 minutes left and could have just kneeled it and ended the clock. So on one hand, the Jets are coming off as such a rare win, and both of the Bengals losses seem to be like due to missed kicks. Right. A one play thing. The Bengals could easily be 2-0. The Jets could easily be 0-2. And this spread could have been 8.5, 9 if a few breaks had gone the other way. Instead, it opened this week, JP, at 4.5. It opened at 4.5. Wow. It's been bet up to 6 because there are a lot of people like you. I think both the sharps and the public thinking this is a get right spot for the Bengals. Obviously, jumping in after it's lost 1.5 of value is not great. So maybe go with a money line play on this Bengals game or try and tease it down. However, I'm actually doing something interesting and a little different here. I agree with you. This is an absolute get right spot for the Bengals. So I'm actually playing their alternate spreads. And I'm playing minus 9.5, minus 13, minus 12.5, minus 13.5, minus 16.5, right before these key numbers, 10, 13, 14, 17, these key NFL numbers. Play the alt line till right before it. And if the Bengals end up coming out and winning big today, then you return a really nice profit, which is, a substantial payout, and you're selling points because you have the idea of this is a get right spot for this team.
Yeah, and I kind of like that play too. I like buying that up to like the 9.5. Anything higher than that's a little scary for me.
You never ever buy points in football. Don't ever do it. Don't ever buy the plus 2.5 and buy the hook to +3. Just don't do it. It is not worth it. The amount of juice that you pay on the VIG compared to the increased likelihood of it hitting is not in your favor. The books want you to buy points. However, we could use that consideration and end up selling points, and it works in our favor. So we can sell points here, make the bet harder for us to hit, but double our payout if it does, and the percentages actually work in our favor to do so. So love selling points.
All right. Let's see. We have a question on there, but it's a fantasy question. We'll get to that, in just a little. But I have another question. I see this Baltimore line's moving a little bit. I think this morning it was up to -3. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it's opened at -2 or something like that, or close to that.
Where's that game now?
It was at 3 this morning. I do not have my book up.
I'm going to pull it up.
And I know you were very high on San Francisco. Are you still high on San Francisco?
We're talking the Baltimore Ravens Patriots game or the
Yeah, I was just going to throw something out there to kill some time while you're pulling it up.
No, I'm looking it up. So that Ravens game is still a -2.5 on my screen. Did you have that's a huge stay away game for me, JP.
Right. I was going to say that. Is that a stay away?
We're seeing that line open at -2.5. It got to -3 at one point, but we are also seeing about 90% of the bet tickets and 89% of the money being bet on Baltimore. Right. So that just screams public red flag to me. That's a complete stay away. I lean Baltimore myself because I think they're a good team that matches up against the Patriots well, but I will not bet it because these betting splits and betting trends are actually horrifying. So I put on my Twitter, I lean Ravens. And if I had, gun to my head, someone said, Mike, you have to bet on that game, I'm going Ravens. But I'm also horrified and terrified for anyone out there holding a Ravens ticket right now. I think this is going to be a bad day for them.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It kind of scares me, that game. Bill Belichick could be scheming something up defensively to stop what the Ravens do best, and that's Lamar Jackson. That's not an easy task by any stretch of the means, but if anybody could do it, anyone could scheme against him, it's going to be Belichick. Last betting question till we get to the fantasy. San Francisco. Okay, I'm going to ask you again. I remember earlier in the week you were all over San Francisco here. What do you think now? Now that we're right before game time. I guess they play on Monday night, but what are you thinking here for San Francisco?
So this is another situation where I got in on this line so early because not only do I like San Francisco, I love 51 players on San Francisco, and the quarterback was the one question mark this season. Right. And obviously bringing back Jimmy G, you never celebrate an injury. RIP to Trey Lance's ankle. I hope he's doing well. I hope he's healing from his surgery. I hope he gets right. At the same time, Jimmy G does invigorate this offense a little bit. He's familiar with them. We get Kittle back this week. So you look at those things, and you also combine with the other side of the ball where, like, JP, man, Nathaniel Hackett is the worst coach in the NFL.
Yeah, he's pretty bad, huh?
Like, you can't do anything about that. You can't bet into it. I mean, the scary thing. So I jumped on this line at the beginning of the week when the 49ers were underdogs. So I have this at +1.5, even though right now they're -1.5. So we've seen 3 points of closing line value change in this game. At the same time, that's not crossing any key numbers. 1 and 2 in the NFL are not key numbers. So there's not really much difference in betting either side of that. And it's really just a fade Nathaniel Hackett. The one thing to be concerned about is there are betting trends that show Mile High and the altitude is more dangerous earlier in the season. So when you get a September week 4 game in Mile High, bigger impact of altitude than if this game were to be played in November or December. So Denver does have a strong home field advantage. However, their coaching staff is so bad, and the other side of the ball just looks really good right now. I'm willing to go 49ers.
Yeah, and I'm going to bring in our guest now, Ray Lynn, and I want to kind of start with that game in terms of fantasy purposes, because I'll get to it in a second. But let me go ahead and add our man Ray in. Ray, what's going on, buddy?
Hey guys, happy Sunday. Good to be with you.
What's poppin', Ray?
Not much. We're excited to get into it. Let's go, week 3.
Let's do it. So, Ray, so you're a writer for us, fantasy football and NFL writer for us. What are you thinking in terms of fantasy, in terms of the San Francisco 49ers, now that Jimmy G is under center? And I'll give you my thoughts here. I think it really, really helps all of those weapons, especially Brendan Ayuk. I think Brendan Ayuk gets a huge boost now that Jimmy G is under center. I think that offense as a whole gets a huge boost. That offense, okay, I said this on my Twitter, was built for a quarterback like Jimmy G. It was not built for a Trey Lance. And I've been preaching that all offseason. I'm not happy that Trey Lance got hurt by any stretch of the means. I'm not that type. But in terms of fantasy purposes, if you own a Ayuk or even a Kittle, you are thrilled that Jimmy G is under center. How do you feel about that, Ray?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I have to preface it with I am a Niners fan, so I'm going to try my best to not be biased here. You see the Warriors hat that I'm rocking right now. But I agree with you. It's a matter of the devil versus the devil you don't know, right? And we saw in very limited spurts, that the offense with Trey Lance under center was very volatile. But when you look at guys like George Kittle, who's finally healthy and looking to make his season debut today, he has a rapport with Jimmy G, and he's been his guy, and he's put up his best fantasy seasons with Jimmy G under center. So I agree with you. I think that Ayuk also, has been quiet. He's been kind of like a big buy low candidate for me, just because he's been quiet. Right. But down the stretch in the second half of last season, really, ramped up on, the trust from Shanahan. He was I believe made a big leap into, I believe it was the top 30 of receivers over those down the stretch last season. So I think he's going to take a big step forward. Debo's going to be Debo, potentially with, more running game work out of the backfield without Lance now, and, with a less mobile quarterback in Jimmy G. So yeah, I think that, this is, to what Mike was saying earlier, this is an extremely talented roster up and down the lineup, and now with a little bit more stability in place at quarterback, I think that it helps the rest of the fantasy assets on this team.
Awesome. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to jump right here to this question. It seems like a daily fantasy question here, and it's, do you chase Amon St. Brown this week with paying down on a running back? So would you take Amon and pay down on a second tier running back? Fitz, what do you think about that one?
I mean, I see it. It's from Shift Monkey.
Yep.
Monkey, do me a favor and throw in a few options about who that pay down is. I do love Amon-Ra this week. I think that game is going to have fireworks. We've seen the total open at 50.5, get as high as 53 in some places. Again, we keep saying this. We're expecting fireworks in that game. But again, it depends on who your spend down is going to be and how much that impacts your roster. If you're going to pay up for Amon-Ra instead of having a guy like Cortland Sutton, and that's going to cost you a big thing at running back down the line, then I don't love it. But I do love Amon-Ra himself. The cheapest running back that I am playing this week myself in my lineups is David Montgomery. I think he's 5,400. If that gives you an idea, that is where I went for my lowest spend running back this week.
Yeah, and I was reading earlier this morning, there's 20-mile-per-hour winds in Chicago today. So that run game should be firing on all cylinders. Going back to what you said about Courtland Sutton, and I want to mention this, and if he's on your team, Jerry Jeudy is on your team, do not play him this week. And I'm saying that because it's a Sunday night game. And if you have nobody else to put in after he tests that injury in pregame and he doesn't play, you are in trouble. So if you have anybody else, I highly recommend playing him instead of Jerry Jeudy this week. It is just too much of a risk for me. I have him on one of my teams and I'm benching him and I'm starting Pollard in my flex instead. It's obviously I'd rather have a healthy Jeudy, but I think Pollard, and also Pollard plays on Monday. So if I do decide to put Jerry Jeudy in late on Sunday, I can, but late tonight I can, but I'm still probably going to lean Pollard. Players coming off of injury in redraft leagues scare me because we just don't know how much they're going to play. They could be active. They can say, oh, I feel 100%, especially like for an ankle injury or something like that. One bad cut, one rollover, there goes your entire week. So I like to go safe. So if you have Jerry Jeudy, I highly recommend you taking him out.
Can I ask you guys my personal injury sit-start question that I'm dealing with right now and get your guys' feedback to help my Sunday on the season-long fantasy sphere?
Send it out.
I have Justin Herbert. I also have Mike Williams and Gerald Everett. This might take me a minute to explain. So I have a LA Chargers stack. I just moved to San Diego myself. Call it a coincidence. Maybe, maybe not. Okay, so Herbert, obviously dealing with the bruised ribs, the cartilage. They said he fractured his cartilage. I used to study anatomy. That's impossible. So he's dealing with hurt cartilage, bruise, maybe a fractured rib of some sort. Anyways, very up and down whether or not he's playing. From my world in the betting space, we've seen that spread start as high as -10, hover around -7 for the Chargers when he was questionable, and then a sharp dip to -3. And we're getting reports that he's going to want to play. He's willing to take a painkiller. He wants to push through it. He's been throwing all week. So really good signs. But then the flip side of that coin is, hey, the Chargers medical staff wants him to take the long route. They want him to sit. The line is questionable. Movement shows that, hey, maybe Vegas knows a thing or two and he's going to end up sitting. My other options for quarterback are Jared Goff playing in the 1 o'clock. So I'd have to decide now or wait and potentially play Tom Brady in this Rodgers versus Brady showdown, which is really suspected to be a defensive battle, a slow run-heavy game. And Brady's been, although he's incredibly good looking and reminds me of myself when I look in the mirror, he's been pretty terrible in fantasy. We've been pretty similar on the football field this year as well. So how do you think I should play this? Do you think I should jump the gun, skip the Herbert news, and play Jared Goff? Or, because I'm expecting a lot of points in that game, or wait on Herbert, potentially play Herbert if he plays, and then have to pivot to Tom Brady?
Ray, let it rip. You can go up first.
Yeah, I mean, Fitz, I'm going through a similar thing because I have Keenan Allen on a team, and I think that it makes the most sense, obviously, for him to play the long game and be careful here. I wrote my previews this week on the afternoon slate, including this game, and I said, this is going to be an Austin Eckler game. This is also a reason why the Chargers invested, in a deep backfield behind him. So I think it's going to be super run heavy. I mean, I think it's crazy to say because crazy to recommend Goff, but I think we were so down on him his first year in Detroit, but he's looking so good so far that that offensive line has been playing incredible. So I think Goff is actually a pretty safe bet. I feel like the ceiling here with Herbert's injury is so low that you can't afford to not go for Goff's floor. And honestly, like you said, with the high projected point total in that game, with Minnesota, I think it's a no-brainer for me. What do you think, JP?
Yeah, 100%. I'm going with Goff here, and you got to look at Minnesota's defense too, right? They rank 28th in terms of most yards against in the passing game, but first with touchdowns. So what that means is teams are marching down the field with the passing game, and then they're punching it in the red zone in the ground game. However, the points total for me is a total no-brainer. I am taking Goff. Tom Brady is scaring me this week. He has none of his wide receivers really healthy. I think it's a Fournette type of game. I know Fournette's coming in a little banged up, but with that being said, I think they pound that rock all game long. I like the upside with Goff, and I do think his floor is actually pretty safe as well. Because if you start a Herbert, and Herbert, like you said, is that type of player that is going to want to play to show his team that he's the captain, right? I'm out there, I'm grinding through this. They're going to run the ball with Eckler, maybe a couple dump down screen passes, but they're going to want to make sure it's 3 steps, get the ball out, 3 steps, get the ball out. They're not going to want to have him drop back 5 and just get sacked constantly. So if he plays, I don't really like his floor too much. So I'd definitely go Goff.
I also think his center, Corey Linsley, has been, not really practicing this week. So again, with the protection, also a question mark. It just seems like a situation to stay away from. And if I'm, head coach Brandon Staley, I'd be very conservative here. You want Herbert to be, healthy and firing on all cylinders, for, they're in that super competitive AFC West. Like they have playoff hopes, right? So is it really worth it to take a gamble in week 3?
Thank you guys. I really appreciate it. Let me just jump back to Stud Monkey's question. Chimed in with those budget running backs, Monty, Fournette, and Josh Jacobs. Yeah, Shift. I agree. If you're going to be able to play Monty and get a guy like Amon-Ra, then totally good. Double check on the Josh Jacobs. I know he was sick with a non-COVID related injury, and he was questionable. He originally didn't travel with the team, and then I think he took a late plane or a late. I don't know.
He got in. He's supposed to play.
Yeah, I don't know if that's how you want to play into this in DFS right now. So I would maybe look to pivot off the flex for Josh Jacobs. I think he's priced around 5,200. The good option in that range, I would go, since this is a flex, is to plug in a guy like Jacoby Myers. He's the Patriots wide receiver. The game for the Patriots is being sharped over the 43. It's been bet up to 44.5. We are expecting scoring in this Baltimore Ravens versus Patriots game. So look for the Patriots to need to throw the ball. Look for them to get Jacoby Myers involved. I think he had 13 targets last week. DraftKings is full PPR. It's also a bit of a chalk play. There are going to be a lot of people playing Jacoby Myers. He's in a lot of optimizers. So I'm giving you the pivot option away from Josh Jacobs that's going to be reliable and also not totally impact the rest of your slate. If you play into the chalk at a specific price point pivot, then you're letting the rest of your decisions more impact your outcome because, again, a lot of people are going to have Jacoby, but it should be safe and pivot off Josh Jacobs.
I don't want to throw a wrench into all of that, Mike, but Myers was
Myers is out.
Ruled out. But
oh my God.
Yeah. So, it's not a bad idea to look into.
Shift. I have to go change my own lineups, my guy.
Yeah. So I don't know. Devontae Parker, Nelson Aguilar, look.
Aguilar. Love Aguilar. That's why. Hey, Ray. That's why Aguilar was showing up in the optimizers this morning when I checked. I always check. I check every day. But on this morning, there was a late plug to Aguilar being in there. So very surprising. Shift. I actually like Aguilar now. I actually probably going to plug Aguilar into my own lineups and find that pivot. That's I'm sorry, guys.
I didn't know that even happened either. So I got to go check my rosters when we get off of this as well.
I got to go change my sports ethos. I think I'm playing one of you guys with Jacoby Myers in my lineup right now.
All right. So we don't have any other questions here. So I kind of just want to throw a name out there to you guys. I want you guys to let me know what you think. First, I'll give you my opinion on the player. And then I kind of want to hear your thoughts on this guy. All right. So a couple weeks ago on the waiver wire, I was lucky enough to grab Curtis Samuel. Okay. And this week, the Washington Commanders go against the Philadelphia Eagles. Okay. And I posted it on Twitter, and we had a lot of back and forth between myself and a few other followers that some people are very high on Samuel this week, and some people are very low on Samuel this week. Okay. And my thought process is I'm actually pretty high on Samuel this week. I think he will not see Slay and he will not see Bradbury. Why? He comes out of the slot. Okay. Jahan Dotson's ability to catch the ball as well as Scary Terry are nothing to joke about. So what I mean by that is they're not going to let those guys go against, a bad corner, for example, and keep those guys open for long, passes down the field. And I think Samuel is going to eat on that underneath type of slants, crossing patterns, and things like that. So I am playing Curtis Samuel this week in one of my flexes. What do you guys think of his outlook in week 3?
Take it away, Ray.
Yeah, I think I like Samuel as well. It's hard to forget, how productive he was when he was fully healthy in Carolina. I mean, he was a real weapon, used in a lot of different creative ways. I think the main question was just volume here because it is a little bit of a crowded depth chart here. But to be honest, like he has looked explosive, and he's looked like he's been deserving of increasing volume. And personally, I'm a little iffy on Terry McLaurin because of that. And so you've also seen Logan Thomas start to finally look healthy and demand some target share. As he's been very deserving of that so far. So yeah, I'm on Samuel. Listen, maybe it's a fool's errand to trust Wentz through 2 weeks, but so far so good. At the very least, I think he's going to be competent enough to buoy Samuel and give him a good chance at a strong week. Fids?
Yeah, I mean, Curtis Samuel's usage, I think we talked about this one last week, JP. His usage is just through the roof, and Ron Rivera loves him. They were together in Carolina. They're together in Washington. He's got a big contract. He's a gadget type player. He's like Debo Light for the Commanders. He's involved in the run game and short pass game. He's a go-to gadget, get the ball in your playmakers' hands, and we think Curtis Samuel is one of our playmakers. He could be this year's Cordell Patterson. It's like kind of somewhere in between that mindset for me. I have talked about him on my podcast for DraftKings. I think he's still priced like under $5,000, and that's a joke. Like he's definitely of value until the price starts to rise and meet what his opportunity share has been. Then he's of value. They're also playing against the Eagles today. So now Eagles have a very good offense. They play very fast, even though they're run heavy. So that game should have a lot of scoring. The flip side of that coin is when you do have divisional games, then you do have less scoring. So the Commanders versus Eagles game will have slightly less scoring than a normal Commanders versus Eagles game if they hadn't been in the same division, because these teams are familiar with each other. And they also factor in that, like, when you have a quarterback that's played on the former team, it kind of revs up everyone's engines and the whole defense wants to, come and show out. We saw this with Russ week 1, only scoring 16 points against the Seahawks. We saw this with Baker with the Browns. I'm sure we'll see this with Watson against the Texans in week 11 or whatever it is. We saw this when Brady returned to New England. Obviously, this won't be Wentz's first time playing against the Eagles since then, but divisional game, the first time it's really going to matter that much. Probably a little less scoring, but still, I mean, Curtis Samuel's got to be a guy. They try and get him the ball so much.
Yeah, and I think it's also a lot of like living in the Minnesota was on prime time last week. The defensive, pass defense looked great last week, stopping Jefferson. So I think everyone's kind of living in that moment and not really thinking about where Curtis Samuel is going to line up. Right? They're going to put him in the best position to be successful. That's what Ron Rivera does with Curtis Samuel. So, I mean, am I super high on him, like wide receiver 2? No, not really. But I'm talking about wide receiver 3 flex option for sure. Ray, I think you had a list of guys too that you wanted to bring up. Let's hear them, or let's hear one of them.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna throw one to Fids from a betting perspective. I'm on this Packers Bucks game, because it just seems like it's a graveyard of injuries stacking up, especially on both wideouts. So the two guys I was gonna highlight were, I think that is going to be I think I'm taking the under on the points total, and I'm on board with Packers covering the spread. I believe it was plus 1.5 last I checked. So curious, Fids, your thoughts. But the two guys I was going to look at, focus on here were AJ Dillon and Aaron Jones. I think that there's just a ton of opportunity for them to run with a defensive front that is missing Akeem Nicks. And also, it's crazy because on one hand, AJ Dillon has outtouched Aaron Jones, but Aaron Jones has also been, frankly, the most explosive runner in the league so far. Leads the league in breakaway run rate. A quarter of his runs have gone for 15 plus yards. He leads the league in expected points EPA. So he's just adding so much to the offense that I think that the Packers coaches will just have to lean heavily on their run game, especially with seemingly I think rookie Romeo Dobbs is like seemingly the only healthy wideout on that side. So those are the two that I wanted to highlight. Fids, what is your take on the different betting?
Let me ask you one thing, right? Do you remember what number you got the under at? I know you said the Packers were the plus.
I think it was 40. I think it was 42 when I was checking DraftKings.
Great. Okay, so that I'm okay with.
Yeah.
Anything less than that, I would stay away from. We know 40 and 41 are key NFL totals, so we want to make sure we are north of those numbers if we are betting an under. So if at some places this is priced at 41 and a half, 41, like those I'm not interested in. I want the full 42. I want the push on the 42 and winning on the key numbers below me. So that I agree with. I also agree with the side on the Packers. I mean, I personally lean a little Bucks, and I was talking about this idea with JP on the show before you joined, that there is a lot of games this week that I'm not betting on and that my exposure is a little less than normal because I always know where the sharps are, right? I know where the expert gamblers are putting their money. And then I ask myself, is that also where I want to put my money? And this week, the experts are on the Packers. However, I'm like a little bit iffy on that. I still think, the Bucs defense is really good. I still think they have a strong run game. I think this game is being played in Tampa. Rodgers has never been good in Florida for some reason. Rodgers in heat is not a good combination. He's like, has his stats above a certain degree threshold are significantly worse. So I actually think I would lean Bucks. But if, again, everyone in the industry besides Michael Fiddle is backing the Packers and the under. So those are smart money plays for this game. For the running backs, I'll tell you guys a little secret. You guys might not know this, but A.J. Dillon is actually related to me. He is the cousin. He's like, I think he's the second cousin. He's my stepmom's nephew's somehow related.
That's
anyways,
amazing.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. So somehow got some family ties to.
I think he's part Jewish, right? I feel like I read that somewhere that he has some
Jewish over here.
There we go. There we go.
That's where it works out. So
nice.
So yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. I didn't even know that, but now we're connected.
Isn't Boston College like a Catholic Christian school?
Not too sure. Anyways,
I think it is.
I think it is too.
Before I call him family, now let me tear him down a little bit. I actually think there's inherently just listen, A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones are both such great players. They're both on a team that is going to produce points, and they are going to get them involved and get them touches at the same time. Because they're both so good and because they both play the same position, they inherently limit each other's upsides. So that's not normally the direction that I go with my play. But if we're thinking about safe, good options, those are good options. But they do scare me a little bit knowing that they're timeshare players in a game sharp towards the under where they're the underdogs. That's a scary combination for those guys this week.
Yeah. And in terms of fantasy, I think we saw the Packers figure that offense out last week. It's simply pound with A.J. Dillon, wear out that defense, and then have explosive plays for Aaron Jones. A.J. Dillon just wearing down that defensive line, screen plays for Aaron Jones. You saw a lot of counter runs for Aaron Jones. So I think that's going to be the play moving forward, especially this week because of all those injuries offensively for the Packers. I do like the Packers in this game, but again, it's not something I'm betting on because it's just too, I don't know for me, but I do like that under if you got it at 42. Last point on those running backs. I mentioned it earlier on my Twitter. If you want a share of that Green Bay backfield, now was the time. This was the time to go get Dillon because I think his stock is only going to rise from this game moving forward. Last week, everyone got a little nervous. It was Aaron Jones explosion week, right? We knew it was coming, and Dillon really didn't do much, but he was involved. He was heavily involved. So if you wanted A.J. Dillon, you should have gotten him this week because I think his stock in redraft leagues is starting to go up. So that's all I got to say about that.
JP, last thing I was going to add there, if anybody's still on the fence about any of the betting lines or Packers versus Bucks, I think a lot of this game is going to hinge on the left tackle position. So the Bucks lost Josh Wells, who was already filling in for Donovan Smith. Meanwhile, music to Aaron Rodgers' ears is that it looks like David Bakhtiari is finally back. So I think that will be the difference maker here.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Ray, do you have anybody else on your list? I got a bunch of mine. So
No, go shoot.
All right,
JP.
so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring up a sneaky quarterback play in redraft leagues. I don't know what he costs in daily fantasy, but I think Kirk Cousins is a great play this week. Everyone is down on him because of his poor performance last week. I think that only makes him even a better play this week. This is Kirk Cousins in a nutshell, right? He has an absolute dudder, and then he comes back the next week against a not so good defense, and he's going to light him up. So if you have a guy, let's just say like a Tom Brady, right, like we just talked about, and Kirk Cousins is available, I would go to that waiver wire or to your free agency and get Kirk Cousins and start him. I'm starting him in one of my leagues, and that's because I had Dak Prescott, who's obviously hurt, so I went right away and I got Kirk Cousins. But I think as a sneaky play this week at quarterback, I do like Kirk Cousins.
Especially if you have Herbert too, right?
Right. Herbert's another name. So any type of play where you're like, ah, man, I really don't like this quarter. I would even start Kirk Cousins over Russell Wilson this week. And I know that may be a little bit of a hot take. I just don't like Russell Wilson this week, especially if Judy's banged up. I think, you know the whole debate, right? Was it going to be Courtland Sutton or was it going to be Judy? My take on it was it's going to be both. But if one of them is out, I think it's going to hurt Russell Wilson because he doesn't have that second valve, right? He doesn't have first look, second look. He's going to really hone in on that first look, which is obviously Courtland Sutton. And I think it's going to hurt his value in fantasy this week.
Can I ask you guys a DFS question now as I edit and put Aguilar in my lineup and live on the stream?
Shoot.
Yep.
So putting Aguilar gives me an excess of $600 to figure out how to pivot with. And now my two options to pivot are to change from Jalen Hurts up to Josh Allen or to change from this. I was thinking about playing a really budget Jacksonville Jaguars defense playing into the Herbert injury and saying, okay, maybe Herbert doesn't play, maybe Chase Daniel plays, and they're a really bottom level defense who might overperform if we get a sudden non-franchise all-star quarterback playing there. They're priced as if they're going against Justin Herbert, and they might be playing against Chase Daniel. So I could either go Josh Allen with Jaguars defense or go with a guy like Jalen Hurts, who I absolutely love. He's a darling of mine. And then increase my defensive options to guys like, the Titans, the Seahawks, Panthers. The Eagles. There's other good defenses. Eagles defense is good. I could jump in on the Eagles defense with Jalen Hurts. But again, that Eagles defense and Jalen Hurts is not a stack that you'd want because you wouldn't want to play a defense. You want low scoring games for your defense and high scoring games for your quarterback. So that wouldn't work. So Josh Allen and the Jaguars, right? I just talked myself into it.
Yep. I would have to second that too. I mean, this Miami Bills game could be an absolute shootout as well. I think Tua is coming out to prove something. However, the Bills defense is nothing to sniff over. But I do think Josh Allen comes out and has an absolute monster game because why? He's Josh Allen and he does it every week. Now, that's not to say that Jalen Hurts isn't a bad play as well. But I do like what you mentioned with the Jacksonville defense. I think you're absolutely right. Being priced at Justin Herbert, right? That's where they're priced at. And he doesn't play. Absolutely. I would definitely go with the defense there.
Yep. Made it happen. Josh Allen is in the lineup. That's my guy.
All right. We got 2 minutes. We got 2 more minutes till we're going to sign off. Any other players or any?
Yeah, I want to remind everyone one thing right now. Go to whatever betting site that you use. Go to the week 4 lines and get that Browns -3 right now. Browns -3 over the Falcons for week 4. Do not let that one slide away. Browns will have 10 days rest off the mini bye. Falcons will be returning home to their families after 2 weeks. We want to be in on the Browns and fade the Falcons. Definitely love that play for next week.
Yeah, I second that. I'm going to go to my site right now as soon as we get off of here and take that. Another thing I'm keeping my eye on this week is Pitts, right? What is Pitts going to do this week against a defense that can't cover a tight end? All right, I am praying to the fantasy gods that he does something. I took him early in 2 of my major leagues. I thought they would have a game plan to use him. They don't have a game plan to use him whatsoever. However, hopefully that changes this week. So one guy I'm really paying attention to is Kyle Pitts.
And a big return, I think, is going to be J.K. Dobbins. Was a little bit surprising to see that the Ravens made Kenyon Drake an inactive, but maybe that's just the mark of confidence that Dobbins is actually ready to go. I'm personally sitting him for one week just to see how he looks here, but curious as your guys' thoughts and on him, coming back and moving forward if he can be trusted.
Yeah, if I had him, which I don't have any shares of him, I'm not playing him this week. I need to see what he looks like first. I actually had a follower ask me in my DMs whether Miles Sanders or J.K. Dobbins. It was a no-brainer to me. I'm going Sanders. Again, I need to see it before I believe it. His injury, the ACL I believe it was ACL, right? Was it MCL? ACL?
Yep.
Is
ACL,
nothing to, you got to pay attention to that. You got to see how he looks, explosiveness. We've seen a lot of running backs with ACL injuries do absolutely nothing in that first year. They don't trust their knee as much as they should, and they need to work on their explosion. So I would stay away from J.K. Dobbins this week. But if you have him, your fingers are crossed that he goes off, even though he may be on your bench.
Let's do it, guys. Week 3. We ready to roll?
All right. We are ready to roll. Okay. Make sure you guys are following all of us on Twitter. It's extremely important. Like, for example, with Fiddle and his early betting trends, make sure you're following him early in the week, as well as my Twitter, because I have things like I mentioned earlier, AJ Dillon. This was kind of your last chance to grab a guy like AJ Dillon in a trade. So make sure you're following me for redraft, and Ray as well for fantasy and NFL write-ups and breaking news. All right. Let's get week 3 going, baby. Best of luck to everybody here listening. If you have any other questions while we sign off, make sure you ask us on Twitter. Boys, Fiddle, Ray, good luck this week. Let's win some money.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
Great job.
Let's go.
Bye, guys.